And I'm gonna take questions off the YouTube to make it easier, Clinton.
Sounds good.
Cool. Welcome back to the Blue Review. A little bit late. We had some technical difficulties, but hopefully we'll get that all kind of figured out. What's going on, Clinton? How are you today?
I'm well. Good morning, Gregory. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Blue Review is presented by Los Angeles International Airport. Hire LAX creates life-changing career opportunities for Los Angeles residents. For more information, check out Hire LAX on Eventbrite. Now, Clinton, we are now in a situation with the Dodgers after that 11-8 loss to the San Diego Padres that this is who the Dodgers are. I don't know how much better way to put it. They are a team that can score 8 runs on any given night, but they do not have the pitching to get it done past that. They're going to give up runs. I mean, yes, Gavin Stone is a rookie, but we're dealing with a lot of rookies. And even Evan Phillips is going to give one up every once in a while, and he did it again last night. That doesn't happen often, but it does happen. And against the much better teams that they're going to see in the postseason, this is an issue.
Yeah. Well, let's review some of the things we talked about yesterday. First of all, James Outman, horrible game, 0 for 3, 2 missed plays, both of which ended up with runs that probably, again, like the holisticness of this team is not just what happens at the plate and what happens on the mound. It's little plays like that make you worry about stuff. And when we talked yesterday about, what are you actually getting out of this player besides hot months here and there? What is the everyday stuff? Stuff like that is concerning when you think about a playoff run. So a tough night for the rookie in that regard.
He did say that it was his fault afterwards, that play with Chris Taylor in the outfield.
Yeah, I didn't need him to tell me that. I was watching the game. So there
he's a center fielder. Those are his plays. He's got to call it out. That was
there was the previous play, too, where a ball bounced over his head. You know what I'm saying? Where he was the only one in the play. And all I'm getting at here is that, we're at the point of the season where these little things matter. So as we are speaking to Dodger fans, we will be taking note so that when you see these things, you are not looking like, oh, my God, that's an aberration. Now, also, Mookie got another one. I thought the interesting thing about that is that
two.
I feel like, but a leadoff one, excuse me. That's what I meant to say, a leadoff homer. I sort of feel like that's going to end up being the statistic that maybe not we think about most on this season, but let's just presume they're not going to win the World Series. You're going to think, man, Mookie hit a lot of home runs and he really got up there on that leadoff homer list, which, by the way, is topped by Ricky Henderson at 81, which is like twice as many as anybody else. It's unbelievable. So those were a couple interesting things that I noted from the game last night, specifically regarding what we talked about yesterday.
Well, and talking about Mookie, let's just stick with Mookie here just for a second. This is the first real year that that the Dodgers have seen Mookie Betts. This is the first time we've actually seen a full Mookie season, because we had it in 2020 when they won the World Series, but that was a shortened season. There's a lot of other things there. It's been so impressive to watch all the things that Mookie Betts has done this year, and then him and Freddie Freeman together. That they're one of the top 1-2 punches ever in baseball, and we're going to get screwed out of a good playoff series. It's too bad.
Yeah, I mean, that's where you start to wonder what is the team? I don't know. I mean, I don't want to get into a whole thing, but you start to wonder, are they? I don't want to say wasting years, but just how good is this team in terms of a lot of different things regarding expectations. So Mookie had a good one. As for the pitching, though, which you brought up in the open, I mentioned this yesterday. Again, when you have 4 rookies, you can't go into anything thinking this is a traditional setup and we'll just kind of see how it goes. Number one, it's a little too taxing, I think, on the mindset of the guys on the mound, the young men. And number two, I just don't think that you can look day in and day out at your bullpen like that, just from a physicality standpoint of the arms, and expect to be able to get the best out of guys every night. So I mentioned this yesterday. Are we going to see them go to something a little different as a way to sort of prep yourself for the playoffs from a opener, perhaps more bullpen game standpoint, just to make sure that you don't screw up the morale of these young guys? Because at this point, everybody's playing for a playoff position in terms of making a roster. And I don't necessarily know that anybody's proven it. And I don't necessarily know that traditional starts are going to be the way that they do prove it, Greg. You know what I'm saying? Like this
Yeah.
is again a very interesting evaluation period for a team that's pretty much locked into making the postseason.
Yeah, they're locked in, which is nice that they're locked in to make the postseason. But we're going to get a situation. What you're talking about, we don't know what the postseason is going to be. Are we going to get openers? Are we going to get starters? It's kind of up in the air. And like you said, this is going to be something that you're figuring out in September, and it's really tough to watch. And the thing that's bothering me the most about this team is that they're kind of on a downward trajectory right now, rightfully so, with no pitching staff anywhere else. They're really not what you need it to be. Yeah. I mean, Bobby Miller's giving up runs, and Gavin Stone was giving up runs, and Sheen was giving up runs. Everybody is kind of in a downward spiral. And you're seeing baseball is such a team, such a game of just like runs. Look at teams like Philadelphia. They are on fire, and Tree Turner's on fire. There's all these other teams are on the upward trajectory, and the Dodgers are on the downward. It's really frustrating to what we're watching right now.
Well, that's what I'm asking you. What would you do in this situation? I personally would find a way. I don't know that this kind of pitcher exists on the staff as constituted, but I'd find a way to have an opener. You know what I mean? For pretty much.
Every game?
Long relief games. This is what I would do at some point because you have to practice it in order for it to make sense in the postseason.
Well, they've done it before in the past, and they've done it a few times this year. Caleb Ferguson has gotten starts. And Brusdar Graterol's gotten starts. Ryan Yarbrough just started, but he ended up going 4 or 5, and it's possible that that's going to happen. And they can do it. They've known to do it, but. I mean, if you do it, some of these guys you need later in the later innings, like those guys. Caleb Ferguson, I don't know if I need to see him too much anymore. He's been bad. His whip is just out of control. It's up there in like 1.4, which is way too high for a reliever. So I would at this point keep the guys, like Bobby Miller, Ryan Pepio. I'm interested to see what Lance Lynn does tonight because this is a team that can hit home runs in the Padres. They did it obviously last night. And if Lance Lynn gets up another 8 spot, he's done for me. Completely done for me. And then you're just kind of mix and match wherever you can. You get what you can.
Well, right. But again, I mean, the only reason I asked that is because we're getting down to like real brass tacks here. I mean, talking in generalities is not really what we're going to be able to do. We're going to have to specifically refer to who's going to be on this roster because you're running out of dudes. So if Lance Lynn's not on the postseason roster, if any of the other people you named just don't make it, well, then who will? And I think you have to have Lance Lynn on the roster if no other reason than you don't have the arms, like you don't have the physical bodies to get through the innings from a matchup standpoint. So maybe he's not your best opportunity for an opener. Maybe he is though, because if he's going to give up homers, you're going to want him to give them up early as opposed to later. And so I'm very curious as to what the choices they're going to make are and whether or not we're going to see those choices reflect on the regular season as much as we do in the postseason because it's, they've done it before. But if you have to going into a series with that mindset is very different from saying, okay, it's an emergency circumstance. Therefore, that's what we're going to do. So that was tough. The other thing that I thought was actually most important about this was that they didn't get a hit from the 3rd to the 9th. Bats kind of went cold in the middle of the game. And
happens.
It happens, but this is the thing where with this team, a lot of talent, not necessarily a ton of consistency when you need it, but a lot of early runs, and that's going to be the way that they win games. Last night was a microcosm of why I don't think this team is going to win much in the playoffs as constituted.
I completely agree. That was exactly the over and over we've been talking about how their offense is so good. If they put up 8 runs a game, if they just put up 8 runs a game, they should be fine every single time. Well, they put up 8 runs and lost because the pitching staff just couldn't hold it together. That's going to be a problem. And the Padres did something. They were getting runs in every inning. It felt like it just over and over, and then finally just broke through in the 9th. That's what we're going to see a lot of because they don't have I don't think this team, as currently constituted, is going to do enough in the postseason. It's too bad. It was such a good year to start. It was really looking like it's going to be really good, and they're just falling apart. No pitching staff at all. It's just one of those years. We just lost it in September.
Yeah,
it's the doom and gloom review.
No, it's not the doom and gloom review. I just the reason I bring this up is because you wonder what I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to say this, but this is the kind of thing you look at when you're talking about how you put together a team. You don't win the World Series in May. You don't win the World Series in July. And
August.
if teams are continually fading, As far as roster construction goes, you've got a larger concern there from a front office standpoint. Never mind potentially a managerial one, which I don't believe in as much. I think this is a larger issue about how they're actually assembling teams and what they're doing with it. But yeah, it's concerning because you don't want to go into every season thinking, all right, well, great, we got to wait around till October to find another team that's going to fade. That's not what you want. So.
No.
What do we have from the YouTube comments?
From the YouTube, there's people on the YouTube, but if you got questions on the YouTube comments, put them on there. I'll read them. We got about another couple of minutes, so I'll get whatever I can out of here. But I see one. Okay, this is from Skimmer930. He says, do we blame Friedman for the lack of pitching? I don't think we can blame Friedman for the lack of pitching. Maybe they could have gotten somebody in the offseason, but he was expected to have Clayton Kershaw is the number 3 starter. They're expecting to have Dustin May back healthy. They're expecting to have Tony Gonsolin back healthy. They're expecting, hopefully, to have Walker Buehler, but it's kind of in the air. And they're expecting to have Julio Urias on a contract year, supposed to have one of the better years of his life. And then they traded for one of the guys that in Lance Lynn, which he started off really hot, but he's giving up a ton of home runs again. That he was they went out and they tried to get somebody. I can't blame him for the pitching because their top 5 guys are not there.
Well, okay. The question is, are you blaming Friedman for something that involves what you didn't try to do, or are you thinking about the consequences for what did happen? Namely, getting Lance Lynn, which, okay, sure, you went and got a guy. It hasn't worked out. Who's that on? The guy who gets him. Do you think about Friedman in the context of maybe Dustin May should not have been back last year and therefore perhaps would not have been in this place this year? You have to. To that point, I do think that the Walker Buehler decision to shut him down ends up being the right one. Did they probably do that because of what happened with May? Yeah. But once again, these things are all intertwined. And so while you don't necessarily have to go one for one, checker for checker on I blame Friedman because this person or this thing didn't work out, like the holistic view of what is actually happening with the players available to the team is something that the front office is clearly responsible for. And that's where it becomes difficult because, sure, there's a reason for everything happening. There's always a good indication as to what you were trying to attempt. But if you're going to say it's World Series or bust every year, but these decisions keep adding up to nothing close to it, I mean, what are we doing other than looking at the front office at that point?
I think that's something that we can talk about tomorrow. And that was this year actually World Series or bust? And I'm not sure that it was, but I think we can discuss that a little bit tomorrow. That'll do it from Big CY. Greg Bergman, thank you, LAX. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.